Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Section 6 of our brand new Cybercrime course. And today we are going to be talking about malware. And malware is a really big umbrella term, okay? It encompasses a whole lot of wildly different things. But essentially, malware is just the generic name for any program that gets onto your computer or other digital device and does something bad that you don't want it to do, right? And we're going to be talking in this subsection about a bunch of different kinds of malware. But the important thing is, uh, in most jurisdictions, creating malware is not illegal. Owning malware is not illegal. It doesn't become illegal until you infect somebody else's computer or digital device with that malware. So, researchers and white hat computer hackers and people like that, they are perfectly legally able to study new malware, create their own, see what works, as long as they're only infecting computers that they own or have legal access / rights to. Now, malware is a huge problem. Okay, and the more our lives and our everything around us becomes increasingly digitized, the more of a problem it's going to be. So some estimates put the number of new pieces of malware in 2022 at the almost 300,000 range. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of these different kinds and forms and types of malware. Now, the most commonly known and the most commonly thought of type of malware is the virus, right? And viruses, again, is a slightly tighter but still an umbrella term that describes lots of different computer programs that through some human action infect a computer. And that could be clicking a link, could be downloading a file, could be installing a program, but a human has to do something at their computer or laptop or tablet or cell phone to cause themselves to get infected. And once they're infected, a virus can do dang near anything. Some viruses steal computer data. Some viruses delete computer data. Some viruses, they can do essentially anything that the programmer and the malware creator can think of for them to do, right? And there have been lots of famous viruses over the years. The Melissa virus, the I love you virus, there's tons and tons and tons of these. And some of them have lifetimes measured in weeks or months. Some of them have lifetimes measured in years. But usually, hopefully, viruses will kind of be they'll become useless after a while. The virus will be designed to exploit a hole or a vulnerability in a piece of software that either gets patched or that software becomes no longer commonly used. I'm sure there are still viruses out there for Windows 95, but since not a lot of people are using Windows 95 anymore, they're essentially dead viruses, right? Now, there are two kind of subsets of viruses that are slightly different that I wanted to touch on real quick. And one of those is boot sector viruses. And overly simplified, a boot sector virus is one that infects a piece of the computer, a piece of the hard drive, or the BIOS on the motherboard in such a way that it's kind of the infection occurs and exists kind of prior to and outside of the operating system. So that makes it a lot easier for the virus writer to hide, to protect it from different kinds of antivirus programs. And it makes it a lot more difficult for the end user, once it is discovered, to get rid of it. So the boot sector is kind of the initial piece of the computer when you first turn it on that allows the computer to operate prior to the operating system being loaded. So in that way, if you hide a virus there, it kind of loads into the system above or outside of the operating system which again offers numerous advantages to the virus writer. The other kind of virus I want to talk about is macroviruses. And macroviruses are viruses that are written in and written for individual pieces of software rather than, say, the operating system. So, for instance, you can write a macro virus for Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, and at that point, it doesn't really even need the operating system. It runs entirely within that sub-program. And thus, for instance, even if I'm running Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel on a Macintosh or Linux computer, that virus could still infect my device, even though I'm not running Windows. So it's kind of becomes independent of operating system and becomes attached specifically to that piece of software, and it's written entirely kind of within the language of that software, if that makes sense. Now, worms are very similar to viruses in that they can do pretty much anything, you know. The difference is in how they're spread. So a virus, again, as I said on the last slide, requires some human interaction. Download a file, insert a disk, click a link, something, right? Whereas worms don't require a human to do anything. They just go. Once they're released, they spread and spread and spread and spread automatically by the computers that are infected, kind of automatically sending them on to other computers. And because of this, you know, whereas viruses might have a lifetime of months or years, worms frequently have a lifetime of hours, right? And the first major internet malware of any kind was the Morris worm, which I think I talked about in an earlier section. And that, remember, that one took down 10 or 20% of the entire global internet at the time in a matter of hours, right? But it was kind of patched and fixed and gone within a day or two. I mean, it was a major infection, major spread, but it really didn't last very long. But interestingly, that Morris worm back in 1988 or 1989 did result in the creation of the first CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team. And now those are kind of all over the place. There are tons of CERTs all over the world used for different purposes and different areas of computing and cybercrime. The third kind of malware we're talking about are Trojans. These are named after the horse from Greek mythology, which, if you're not up on your Greek mythology, you know, the siege of Troy way back in, you know, X thousands of years ago, there was the horse left behind that the city defenders took into their gates, and then a bunch of enemy soldiers popped out in the middle of the night and opened the gates and blah, blah, blah. So, Trojan computer viruses or computer malware are named after that Trojan horse because they work in kind of a similar way. Trojans are kind of, again, a blanket term for a program that looks legitimate, a program that looks like it's kind of a normal something you would want. But once you download and install that program, the payload is released, just like the soldiers popped out of that wooden horse. And that kind of infects you or infects your device kind of behind the scenes, despite you thinking that program was something good, something you wanted, right? And again, like viruses and worms, there are darn near an infinite possible number of effects these programs can have. Some of the common ones are things like keyloggers. And a keylogger is just a piece of malware that, you know, every key you press gets recorded and then usually sent back to the bad guy, the malware author. And then they can, you know, if they see every key you've pressed, if they have a record of every key you've pressed, they've got, I mean, think about it, usernames and passwords, credit card numbers, social security numbers, private messages. Keyloggers are often used both in things like corporate espionage and in things like stalking. Another thing Trojans can do is give file or peripheral access. So in other words, I accidentally download a Trojan. The payload for that Trojan can give a bad actor access to my hard drive and all the files that are stored there, or it can give them access to my webcam and they can watch me record these videos, or my microphone and they can listen to everything I say. And then another thing that Trojans can do is install proxy software. So we talked about proxies in an earlier section, but essentially what this would do is allow a bad actor to use your computer unknowingly as a proxy for them for committing crimes. So say a bad actor installs a Trojan proxy onto my computer without me knowing it, and I'm completely unaware, then they start using my computer as a proxy to say download child porn. Now the FBI tracks that download, sees that it came to me. They come to my house to arrest me, thinking it was my doing, when in reality it was this bad guy who is now hidden behind this level of anonymity, because their proxy Trojan is not going to keep records of where the bad guy is. So the FBI, even once they figure out that it wasn't me that committed that crime, they're still going to have trouble tracking it now from me to the actual bad guy, if that makes sense. Botnets are one of the most fascinating kind of subtopics within the field of malware, in my humble opinion. And botnets are kind of similar to what we were just talking about with the whole proxy thing. But botnets are where a certain kind of virus or certain worm or certain piece of malware spreads to as many devices as possible, according to the person who wrote it. And once those computers are infected, the botnet controller or master can use those zombies or bots to do essentially their bidding, right? So if my computer gets infected with one of these botnet malware viruses, whatever you want to call them, now my computer is kind of sitting and it'll connect to a server somewhere out there on the internet and just listen for commands. And if the bot controller comes in and puts a command into that server, my computer and every other computer infected with this same botnet virus will do whatever that command is, right? So one of the things these are commonly used for is DDoS, or distributed denial of service attacks. So essentially, if a botnet controller or master has, tens of thousands of different computers and tablets and cell phones all infected with their zombie software, and they get upset at a website or a company or even an individual on the internet, that zombie controller or master can tell all of the computers infected with their botnet malware to start sending junk data to that target, to that person that upset them, or that company or that website. And each individual member of the botnet is going to, send a bunch of junk, as much as it can, which is honestly, compared to modern web servers and modern, high-end computers, really not that much. But when you have tens of thousands of them all sending that junk data, that target is going to get overwhelmed pretty fast. And in the best case scenario for the bad actor, it's going to completely shut that computer down. They're just going to be so overwhelmed with this junk data that they just say, oh, no, I can't deal with it, I quit, and crash. But even in lesser circumstances, even if they don't have enough power to completely overwhelm the target like that, they're at least going to slow down access and make it much more difficult for legitimate users to access that website or service or whatever. So if a really large DDoS were to hit a major website like PayPal or a bank or something, even if it kind of slows access significantly for even a few hours, that company could lose hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars just through reduced access for a matter of a few hours. I mean, modern major financial services like that can be hugely impacted even by a relatively small interruption in service. Another thing you can do with a botnet is hide files, right? So let's say I have some new hacking program that I want to keep secret, or I downloaded the latest ballistic missile technology from a Department of Defense server and want to hide that somewhere. I don't want to keep it on my computer, right? Because that's evidence. If the police come, they're going to find it, and, I don't want them to find this file on my computer, because then I'm going to prison. But if I have a botnet out there, I can cut the file into small chunks and hide chunks on each one of those botnet computers. And that way, I can still access it anytime I want it, but no single computer has all of it, and my computer has none of it. So that kind of allows me to hide that file a lot easier and more effectively than I could if I was just keeping it on my machine. Another thing you can do with this, with a botnet, is send spam messages, right? And we've all received spam emails. Some of us get 1 million a day. But spam emails can be anything from, purchase this product to, come watch my YouTube video, or, come do this or do that. Again, there's a gazillion different kinds of spam emails or spam messages or, spam whatever. And most of us that receive this spam, we just kind of block and move on. But if the spam sender has a 10,000 device botnet, if I block one, they've got 9,999 more. If I block two, they've got 9,998 more. So they're able to use these bots to send spam over and over, and they don't have to worry about potential recipients just blocking the sender or ignoring the sender or whatever, because there's always more. So what's really scary, botnets were already a problem when it was just, desktops and laptops that could be infected and controlled. But now with the Internet of Things, botnets become way easier, way more powerful, way higher number of potential infections, right? So imagine a botnet malware or virus that I designed to infect not computers, because computers commonly have antivirus. So I don't want to infect computers. I want to infect the Internet of Things. I want to infect internet-enabled refrigerators, or internet-connected thermostats, or internet-connected automobiles, or whatever. These very rarely have any kind of real antivirus. Security in their design is usually kind of, an afterthought, not really a priority. So I can infect them more easily. It's much more difficult for the end user to figure out that they've been infected and become part of a botnet. I can relatively easily create a botnet of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands because there's so many of these devices. So the Internet of Things has made it both easier to create botnets and harder to detect when devices have been infected. And thus, that's really the big scary thing when it comes to botnets. Now, the last subtype of malware we're going to talk about is ransomware. And keep in mind, this is just a very short list. This is, nowhere near all the different kinds of malware that are out there. But ransomware is a relatively new kind of malware. And it's honestly one of the worst to get infected with, my humble opinion. But basically what happens with ransomware is you somehow get infected with this piece of malware, and in the background it starts encrypting all of your information. All of the files on your hard drive, all the stuff you have saved anywhere, it encrypts it all. And then anytime you try to use your computer, you just get a message like the one above that just says, hey, well, this one is pretending to be from the FBI. It's not really from the FBI. But, everything's encrypted, so I can't access it. When I try to access it, I get this message that says, you've been locked out. You need to send X amount of money to X place in order to unlock all your files and get access to your computer again. So, in the early days, this would be, you have to send US dollars to a certain bank account, but that became way too easy to track. So now with the invention of cryptocurrency, usually these ransoms are are needing to be paid in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, which makes it much more difficult, although remember, not impossible, to track those if you do report it to the authorities and law enforcement starts investigating. Now, one of the problems is a huge number of people who are infected with ransomware end up just paying the ransom. And sometimes they even, receive the key to unlock their computer or device. A lot of times they don't. They just pay the money and then never hear anything again. It's bad enough when an end user, when just a normal kind of person gets their home computer infected with one of these, because you could lose, everything from family photos to stuff you've written to anything you don't have backed up outside of your home computer, you could potentially lose, right? So you're willing to pay a pretty decent amount of money in order to get that back. But when businesses get hit with ransomware, that's even worse, because now we're not talking, lovely mementos from family pictures and stuff. We're talking money, lots of money. So if my computer, all the data I have encrypted by this ransomware is worth $1 million in business, and the ransom's only $10,000, well, I'm inclined to pay it, right? So lots of businesses and even end users end up just paying the ransom and never reporting the crime to law enforcement. So it's difficult to know how much of this stuff is actually happening. But there are ways we can estimate it. And there was one survey of businesses that have been hit by ransomware, and 73% of the responding businesses that had been hit with ransomware ended up just paying the ransom. So this can be a really great way, or I shouldn't say great, a really horrible way for malware writers to make money. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll be right back.